Eagle stratagems in Helldivers 2 are offensive stratagems that call upon the Eagle 1 warplane to swoop in and drop some freedom on the enemies below. This can be in the form of a barrage, napalm, or even a nuke, and each one has their own strengths and number of uses before needing to rearm. Which begs the question, which of these Eagle stratagems are the best? And which are the worst? Dr. Pooplove here, and that's what I'd like to find out. In this video, I will be ranking each of the Eagle stratagems on a tier list, with S being the best and Poopator being the worst. But not just one tier list, 3 tier lists, because the effectiveness of these Eagles will wildly vary depending on whether you are facing off against the Terminids, the Automatons, or the Illuminate. Starting with the Eagle Strafing Run, an eagle that swoops through with heavy armor penetrating fire in a forward directional pattern from where it is thrown. And versus the bugs, this can have some pretty good use. Throwing this on the horde can often yield you big numbers as your eagle swoops in and targets as many enemies as it can, and because this fires forward, this can actually be useful in trying to clear the path in front of you so that you can make it through. But this can also be great for utility, dealing with spore towers in one use, as well as dealing with all 3 shrieker nests and even about 2 uses of these if you can line up your eagles nicely. And even though you wouldn't think so, this actually can also close bug holes. Now, despite this being a heavy armor penetrating weapon, this isn't really the best for the bigger guys, and it will often need multiple uses in order to take these guys out. But it can one-shot the impalers if you go for their weak spots, and overall it will just weaken these guys pretty well for you. Now, if you get the expanded weapons bay upgrade in your spaceship, you're gonna end up with 5 uses of this, which is very nice, giving you a lot of chances to use this and make good work for you. And another consideration that often might go overlooked with stratagems is how easy it is to key in this particular stratagem, making it something you can whip out easily when you get into a jam. I like this quite a bit. This has a lot of all-around great multi-purpose use, and for that, I'm going to give it an S for the bugs. Now, for the bots, this feels pretty good as well. What I love about this is you can clear a good bit of the medium guys, especially if they are close. And with the 5 uses, especially if you unlock the expanded weapons-based ship module upgrade, this can be a very effective way to help you out when you get into those types of jams. Or it can be useful to just demolish the fabricators in one go. Now, I wouldn't rely on this too much for the Hulks or the tanks, although it can take them out, it often doesn't do so super efficiently unless you're able to get at those vents. Either way, this is pretty useful on this front. I'm going to give it an A for the bots. Now, for the squids, it really feels like the Eagle Strafing Run was actually made for this front, largely in this stratagem's ability to handle the shields. One quick toss of this can eliminate spaceship shields so you can follow up with a grenade into the hole, which will save you a lot of time, especially compared to things like assault rifles. And with the 5 uses here, it means that you can clear a bunch of these up pretty nicely. Now, this also will take out the harvester shields very quickly and even can destroy their shield generators in the process, leaving these guys vulnerable. Although I will say following it up with more strafing runs isn't the most efficient use, and it will take multiple in order to finish these guys off. But another great thing about this is how good it is for the general horde, being able to just wipe out a good chunk of them, especially as you run away. And one thing we'll talk about with some of the other eagles is, unlike most of the eagles, this one fires forward and vertical of where you throw it. And that actually can work pretty well with the grids of the city streets, clearing anything that's directly in front of you. This is very solid and useful, and so I'm going to give it an S tier for the squids. Now, the next eagle is quite different from the strafing run. We have the Eagle Airstrike, where rather than raining down bullets in a vertical forward directional pattern, this is actually going to fly horizontal to where you throw it and drop a barrage of explosive anti-tank bombs without really any other sorts of targeting. And for the bugs, this can yield some great benefits. The explosions are pretty great for utility, being able to deal nicely with the spore towers and shrieker nests. And if you can aim this thing well to understand the swoop of the bombs, you can actually clear multiple bug holes in a single use. And this is also one of the few eagles that can actually clear a Bile Titan bug hole. Now, versus the main horde, this can be nice, but it's not the most effective use of this, especially if the enemies get close, because you can end up getting caught in the blast. This seems to do the best versus the chargers and the impalers, being able to take them both out with one go. And it seems to take about 2 for the Bile Titans. With the expanded weapons bay ship module upgrade, this gives you 3 uses, which is very nice. But either way, just make sure you keep track of how many of these you're using. This is good, but it does take some getting used to in throwing this down and trying to get it to hit what you want, as it doesn't really come in targeting things. So you will have to get used to that. This is a good option. It's just not the absolute best. I will give it an A for the bugs. Now for the bots, I think this can be decent. This is great for the fabricators and the turrets, clearing these out in just one use. And it's also good for clearing an area where the medium guys are, although the imprecise nature of this means you will need to get pretty proficient at triangulating the horizontal bomb drop pattern to make the best use of this. This also does anti-tank damage, which can be good for tanks and hulks, and that feels pretty good. Now for the factory striders, this will take a good number of these in order to work, and I do remember at one point these guys could actually go down in a single use of this, but I was not able to achieve this in one go, and I think it would be nice if you could still do this, but maybe that's too strong. Still, this is one of the better eagles for you on this front in order to dish out multiple anti-tank barrages onto the enemies, so I will give this an A. Now for the squids, I find this to be a bit unremarkable. The Airstrike is not enough to take down the spaceships, and even won't always take their shields completely down. For the horde, it can wipe out a good chunk of them, but not as efficiently as many of the other eagles that you have. And even for the harvesters, this actually struggles to be an effective method in order to take these guys out. This honestly feels pretty bad on this front, but it can have at least some impact, enough to keep this from the poop hater category, so I will give it a C for the squids. Our next eagle will carpet an entire area with explosions. The Eagle Cluster Bomb drops a series of very dangerous medium armor penetrating bombs aimed at dealing with many of the lower level enemies occupying an entire area. And for the bugs, there are a lot of downsides to this, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad. Now, this can't really effectively close bug holes, although I think it may be able to if you're lucky. It also does minimal damage to the chargers and the titans, and if you don't know how to use it properly, you can explode yourself and your teammates quite easily. That being said, this actually has some great use versus the horde, which makes up for a lot of these downsides. You can just completely clear the field of the low to medium bugs with this, who in my opinion are actually the biggest threat on this front. This also can though deal with the impalers nicely in one shot, which is pretty good. I like to use this at objective sites in order to try to clear that area, or use this on bug breaches to make them less dangerous. I also am of the mind that this is a better option for you as compared to something like the Airburst rocket launcher, which has a similar impact on the battlefield. With the Eagle Cluster Bomb, you have 5 quick uses without a need to manually reload or wear a backpack, as well as, in my opinion, just being a little bit easier to avoid killing yourself, although of course it's not foolproof. Basically, as long as you throw this correctly, it's going to drop in a horizontal pattern, so as long as you know that, you can triangulate and keep yourself and your teammates safe. Ultimately, this has some downsides, sure, but the upsides, if used appropriately, can yield you amazing results. And for all that, I gotta give this an A for the bugs. Now for the bots, this can be effective, but just not as much as on the bug front. The cluster can be good for when you have a good deal of the horde in front of you, but ideally they should be lined up a little bit more horizontally to you in order to get the most out of this. Now, this isn't going to be great for things like the hulks, as it doesn't have heavy armor penetration, but for the medium guys, it will do good work of them. Of course, as always, be careful where you throw this, because one bad bounce can end up getting you wrecked. This is good, just not the best. It's okay. I will give it a B for the bots. Now, for the squids, this has its pros and cons. It's not really good for the spaceships, as it won't take them fully out, and it's gonna generally just struggle versus anything with a shield. While it can stagger the harvesters, it will also greatly struggle versus them. But where this starts to see some positives is versus the Voteless Horde and the Overseers, as this can do some great damage to a large amount of them. One thing to keep in mind with this though is the horizontal pattern, which means as you are running through the grid of the city streets, you'll probably want to position yourself perpendicular as you throw this in order for it to get enemies that have kind of lined up and chased you. Because of that, and because of the high probability of self-inflicted damage, you will need to make sure you're doing this safely and getting nicely out of the way. If you can master this pattern, you can make some decent work of this, but I also don't think this is the best option here. I'll give it a B for the squids. Now our next eagle, the Eagle Napalm Airstrike, is quite similar to the cluster bomb, but this time it drops a napalm incendiary firewall horizontally to the throw. And for the bugs, this is pretty nice. Less so for the damage it does when immediately dropped, but more so for its ability to lay down a wall of fire that can really diminish an incoming horde headed your way. And for that, I think this is best used in a defensive way to try to stop an advance of bugs coming towards you. Although you can also use this to try to clear up an area that you are attacking. This is meant more so for the general hordes. It's not going to be that effective versus the elite enemies, although it will catch some of them on fire if impacted. I like this. I think it's got a good amount of potential on this front, but as the bugs don't always line up super nicely, it often doesn't act as defensively nice as I want it to. For me, it gets a B for the bugs. Now, for the bots, this is pretty poop. Sure, you can lay down a firewall to help you with an advance, but the impacts of that fire just work more slowly against the bots, and sometimes they just don't do enough damage, and certainly it doesn't stop the enemies from firing at you, which, although we don't have it yet, something like the inevitable Eagle Gas Strike might do. I really don't recommend this. I find it to be bad. It's poop tier for the bots. Now for the squids, I think this can be pretty awesome, largely because the Voltless are super weak to the flame, so if you lay this down perpendicular to a city street, you can wipe out anything trying to come by. And especially if you time this for when the flying saucers come to spawn in the ground troops, you can do a lot of damage. And since the flames stay on the streets for a while, you can keep doing that damage over time. Now, this isn't going to be the greatest for the shields or the spaceships or the harvesters, and personally, I think you can have similar flame results with things like even the crisper. You can get a lot more bang from your buck with, especially the Eagle Napalm maxes out at 3 uses, so it doesn't seem like a total must-have on this front, but it still can get some great use for it. Ultimately, I'm going to give it an A for the squids. Now, like the 3 eagles before it, this next eagle will drop another barrage, but this time it will be of non-lethal smoke grenades. The Eagle Smoke Strike is meant to block the enemy's line of sight by laying down clouds of smoke. Now, for the bugs, I'm just not the biggest fan. This is not a lethal weapon, so it's not going to do any damage, but rather it's going to help conceal you, and really it's going to be something to help with stealth. Now, the smoke can obscure the bug's view, but if they already see you beforehand, they will continue their trajectory. So unless you are going to beeline it in the opposite direction, it's not going to help as much as you might like. Perhaps this can help hide bugs from spotting you at objective sites or as you are traversing, but only really if you're already in stealth. And I just don't find it adds much significance to stealth in a way that really helps enough. Since most divers aren't even going for stealth, it really seems like a bit of an ineffective niche inside of another niche. I'm not a fan. Poop hater category for the bugs. Now for the bots, I can give this a few extra points, mostly in that you often are facing these guys at range and the smoke can obscure their view and make it harder to hit you. Although this does obscure your own view, making it harder to fight them. I think this can be good if you're trying to escape, mostly in that it makes it harder for them to get on target and shoot you, but it's not going to necessarily stop them from firing, and sometimes they still might end up hitting you. This isn't the absolute worst. It's a little bit better on this front, I think, than the rest, but it's just still not that great. I will give it a C for the bots. And for the squids, I just don't like this. Being able to lay down a line of smoke on the streets, I wish could allow me to have a better chance to escape the Voltless aggro and get back into stealth, but it just doesn't seem like the smoke is really meant to do this, and often it just feels like it doesn't have a huge impact on this front. Poop hater category for the squids. But this next Eagle is very close to the Eagle Airstrike, however, this has more targeting. The Eagle 110mm rocket pods will drop explosive anti-tank barrages that actually aim for the largest enemy near the red beam. And for the bugs, I think this is okay, but I do wish it was better. As this is an anti-tank stratagem that goes for the biggest enemies in the area, you can get this to take out the elite enemies with about 2 of these. It should be able to get the impalers in 1, but only if their weak spot is exposed. And while I think 2 of these is reasonable for a Bile Titan, I do wish this could one-tap the chargers. The bombs from this are pretty narrow though, so don't expect this to get much else or have a huge impact versus the general horde. This can also close bug holes, but it might not always aim for them, as it might go for a nearby bug instead, and that can be frustrating. It's just hard to sometimes tell it to go for what you want. Overall, on this front, I think you're better off with the Eagle Airstrike, which it doesn't target as much, but if you can get used to it, you can probably have better use of this. And as with all Eagles, even though this is precise, having things like rocks, things in the way, you will need to look out for it. It's not going to be precise enough to still hit that. So that's something that you will have to contend with, but that's something you contend with for all Eagles. Ultimately, I like that this has an extra use and deploys pretty fast as compared to the Airstrike, but it's not super amazing. I will give it a B for the bugs. Now for the bots, I actually quite like this, mostly because of the targeting, which can help you deal with the biggest enemies in the area, such as the Hulks or the tanks, in a single use. And although it's not as efficient for the factory striders, it will at least target them, unlike the Airstrike, which will require you to have to aim to get the best use out of, and ultimately will take roughly the same amount of uses. In a similar fashion to the Strafing Run, which can help clear up nearby smaller targets, this can be a great way to clear up nearby bigger targets without needing to aim too much, and it has multiple uses too, which I like, so I will give it an A for the bots. Now for the squids, I'm not a huge fan of this, but I do think it's better than the Airstrike, mostly because of the targeting, which can at least be used to more consistently take down a spaceship shield. Or it can be used to target the harvesters, taking down their shields and shield generators. In some ways it feels a little similar to the Strafing Run, but this is just not nearly as effective versus the ground troops, and it also has less uses, and to me that all makes it a pretty significant downside. It's gonna get a B for the squids. And rounding off the list is perhaps the most popular Eagle here, the Eagle 500 kg bomb, which drops one huge bomb that wipes out almost everything that is unlucky enough to be near it, including Helldivers. And for the bugs, this is simply awesome. The huge explosive radius of this thing means that it can take out a huge chunk of the horde and can also be used to close multiple bug holes in its radius, as well as the Bile Titan bug holes. This can also one-shot most things, including Spore Towers, Chargers, Impalers, as well as even Bile Titans, although it is less consistent at one-shotting these guys, and often you will need to do 2, or follow it up with something else. That is one of the downsides of this, as well as the fact that the explosive radius is pretty big, requiring you and everyone else to get away quickly, as well as with all Eagles, this can end up getting caught on rocks and miss your intended target, which can have disastrous consequences. One thing though that really saves this and keeps it up into the higher tiers is when you get the expanded weapons bay spaceship upgrade, because this allows you to have 2 quick uses of this, and that can help with things like the Bile Titans sometimes needing to take 2. As long as you have that unlocked, you honestly cannot go wrong with this, and even without that, it's still super effective. To me, this is the best possible Eagle in order to take out on this front, so I will give it an S tier for the bugs. Now for the bots, where this is still good, but just not quite as good as I would like. This is really great for the factory striders, being able to take them out nicely, and it can wipe a good chunk of the enemies out when they are clumped together. I also think this is amazing for utility, being able to take out things like fabricators and even larger structures like the detector towers. And when faced with a lot of enemies, the large spread and damage on this thing will just completely wreck an entire area. What's a little weird though is some of the inconsistencies here, like even a direct hit sometimes won't take out a Hulk or a tank in one of these, and that can be a little bit weird. I don't like that, but still the power on this is mostly amazing, and the 2 uses with the expanded weapons bay can make up for that. Ultimately, yeah, this is still gonna get an S tier for me for the bots. And for the squids, This is also pretty great. A single one of these versus a spaceship will just completely knock it out without needing to bother. And while this can somewhat struggle versus the Harvester's shields, generally you can get these guys in one shot when those shields are down. I also just like that this can take out a huge chunk of the Voltless, being very effective in so many ways. Just be sure to watch out for that blast and you will be good. This is an S tier for the squids. And so here we have our list. This is where the Eagle stratagems rank versus the Terminids. Here is where they rank versus the automatons. And here is where they rank for the Illuminate. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below, and check out my Helldivers tier list playlist for more videos like these. Thank you to my YouTube members for joining the Bowel Movement. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.